had an interview with one Sophie Cunningham, and she asked her about Project B and some things about the Indiana Fever and things of that nature. And it's very interesting and very telling, some of the things that Caitlin Clark had to say. I said Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham had to say. And I don't know if Sophie Cunningham
just told us everything we need to know about the WNBA's future in one sentence. If people are going to be paying you multi-million-dollar deals, why would you not? That's not speculation. That's not a rumor. That's a starting guard for one of the league's most valuable franchises, telling you exactly what's about to happen. And the WNBA has no answer for it.
It's right here. So, Sophie Cunningham casts dismal forecast for 2026 WNBA season. Here it says, not everyone is sure that the WNBA will play at all in 2026. At least that's what Sophie Cunningham told Front Office Sports in an interview published November 14th. In addition to the ongoing CBA negotiations, Cunningham addressed a few key topics, including her future with the Indiana Fever and the rumors surrounding Project.
Here's what makes this critical. The WNBA isn't just negotiating over salary increases in the new CBA. They want exclusivity clauses that would prevent players from competing in rival leagues like Unrivaled or Project B. But Project B is offering contracts between $2 and $3 million for a November to April season. Sophie Cunningham's current WNBA salary? Under $200,000. The math isn't complicated. The league is asking players to turn down generational wealth for loyalty to a system that's paid them poverty wages for decades.
Clear that when it comes to CBA negotiations, things are not progressing at a pace that seems particularly helpful or even appropriate. She noted that her understanding is the last time the WNBA leaders and the WNBPA met was 2 weeks ago, and said, I know our execs are talking with their people every single day. I don't think there's been much movement. I think at least there's communication. So that's the biggest thing for us. But normally we don't have meetings unless...
Notice what she said about the CBA negotiations. The last meeting between WNBA leadership and the Players Association was 2 weeks before this interview. 2 weeks. The current CBA expires in October 2025, and we're already in the off-season, with minimal progress. Sophie's own words, I don't think there's been much movement. Translation, they're nowhere close to a deal. And every day that passes, Project B gets more leverage.
Also spoke about Project B in the latest professional women's basketball league that's been announced. Not too many details are available yet about the league, but it was hashed out by a group of investors who initially hoped to create a rival to the NBA. When that didn't work, they turned their attention to the W and women's basketball. For Cunningham, the appeal of the new league is financial. We know Sophie's about the bag. She want her bread. Project B is reportedly...
But this goes deeper than just money. Sophie made it clear in her exit interview that she wants to be Bay well enough to buy a house with her next contract. That's not asking for luxury. That's asking for basic financial security that most professional athletes in major leagues achieve in their first contract. She wants to stay in Indiana. She wants to play with Caitlin Clark. But she's not taking pennies on the dollar to make it happen. And why should she? The WNBA created this situation. They spent years telling players to be patient, that growth takes time, that they needed to build the business. Then Caitlin Clark's rookie season generated record ratings, sold out arenas, and proved the demand was there. The Indiana Fever went from an afterthought to the league's biggest draw overnight. And what did the league offer Sophie Cunningham for being part of that historic season? A standard contract that wouldn't cover a down payment in most American cities.
And that's the answer right there. When Project B comes knocking on Sophie's door, she's answering. She answering the call. And you know what? I don't blame her. Listen, I've been very clear. If Project B called KTV on the way to Project B. It is what it is. It is what it is. And she's been very clear about where she stands in all of this, and that she's trying to get paid. It's the business.
Now look at the timeline. Project B initially tried to create a rival to the NBA. When that didn't materialize, they pivoted to women's basketball. And they're not coming with modest offers. $2 to $3 million contracts for a season that runs November through April. That's the WNBA offseason. Players could theoretically do both if the league didn't demand exclusivity. But the WNBA knows what happens if they allow it. Project B becomes the primary employer, and the WNBA becomes the side gig. The power dynamic flips completely. Sophie's response to Project B tells you everything about where players' heads are at. I don't know much about it. You see stuff on social media, but you gotta take it with a grain of salt. But if people are going to be paying you multi-million-dollar deals, why would you not? That's not enthusiasm. That's not advocacy. That's just cold business logic. And it's the same logic every player in the league is running right now.
And just say, hey, it's strictly about the bread. We could respect and understand if it's strictly about the bread, but once y'all all try to be like this activist league and all this other stuff, and I respect some of the things y'all want to do, but it's like, if you're going to be that, you got to be that all the way around. And a lot of them have not been that, especially what you see them, going to Project B. Sophie Cunningham addressed her future with the Fever. Cunningham also
Here's where it gets complicated for the Indiana Fever specifically. Sophie is a free agent. Kelsey Mitchell is a free agent. The team needs to rebuild around Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hull. That's the core. But you need depth. You need shooters. You need veterans who understand how to play with a generational talent. Sophie Cunningham is exactly that player. She spaces the floor. She plays defense. She doesn't need the ball. And she's proven she can handle the pressure that comes with being Caitlin Clark's teammate. But the Fever can't offer her what Project B can. Not even close. The WNBA salary cap doesn't allow it. So Indiana is sitting there hoping Sophie chooses loyalty over financial security. Hoping she values playing with Caitlin more than buying a house. Hoping she'll take $200,000 when someone else is offering $3 million. That's not a negotiation. That's a prayer.
We're even going to have a league next year, and then people want to come back. We're trying to keep our core together. The Fever battled through several season-ending injuries, including Cunningham's own. Yeah, this was a season from hell for the Indiana in terms of injuries, man. And put in a strong performance during the WNBA playoffs this season. If the team can retain its core, they could end up doing the same next season or achieving even more, which I agree with. But like I said, the six that
and this is happening across the entire league. It's not just Sophie. Every player facing free agency is doing the same calculation. The WNBA wants exclusivity, but can't pay exclusivity prices. Project B doesn't care about building a legacy or growing the game. They're offering market rate contracts for elite athletes, and they're targeting players at exactly the moment when the WNBA is most vulnerable. The irony is brutal. The WNBA finally has mainstream attention. Caitlin Clark's rookie season brought millions of new fans. Ratings doubled and tripled. Arenas sold out. Merchandise flew off shelves. The league proved it could be commercially viable. And now they might lose their players to a competitor because they can't convert that attention into player compensation fast enough. So let's break down what's actually at stake here. Because this isn't just about Sophie Cunningham's next contract. This is about whether the WNBA as we know it survives the next 2 years. First, the exclusivity issue. The league wants to prevent players from competing in rival leagues during the off-season. That makes sense from a business perspective. You can't build a brand if your stars are playing elsewhere 6 months a year. You can't sell season tickets if fans don't know who's going to be on the roster. You can't negotiate media deals if networks can't guarantee which players will be available. Exclusivity protects the league's investment in marketing and development. But exclusivity has a price. The NBA has exclusivity because they pay players enough that overseas leagues can't compete. The average NBA salary is over $10 million. Players don't go to China or Europe during the off-season because the risk isn't worth it. They've already secured generational wealth. The WNBA average salary is around $130,000. That's not generational wealth. That's not even enough to retire on after a 10-year career. So when Project B offers $3 million, the exclusivity argument falls apart. You're asking players to give up financial security for loyalty to a league that's never provided financial security. Second, the CBA timeline. Negotiations have stalled. The current agreement expires in October 20. That's less than a year away. If they don't have a deal by then, the league faces a potential lockout. No games, no revenue, no exposure, and every day of a lockout is another day Project B can recruit players with guaranteed contracts. The WNBA has leverage now because they're the established league with the history and the infrastructure. But that leverage evaporates the moment they go dark. Third, the Caitlin Clark fact. She changed everything. The Indiana Fever went from averaging 4,000 fans per game to selling out 17,000-seat arenas. Her games drew 3 million viewers on network television. She brought casual sports fans into the WNBA ecosystem, and she did it while surrounded by players like Sophie Cunningham, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston. Those players were part of the show. They benefited from the attention, but they also contributed to it. Sophie's three-point shooting created space for Caitlin to operate. Kelsey's scoring took pressure off when defenses focused on Clark. They were essential to making that team work. Now imagine the Fever lose both Sophie and Kelsey to Project B. Suddenly Caitlin is surrounded by replacement-level players. The offense stagnates. The teams struggle, and the casual fans who showed up to watch exciting basketball disappear. The WNBA's golden goose gets wasted because they couldn't keep the supporting cast together. That's not hypothetical. That's the reality Indiana faces if they can't re-sign their free agents. Fourth, the precedent this set. If Sophie goes to Project B, she won't be the last. Other players will see that it's possible to leave the WNBA and get paid. The floodgates open. Project B doesn't need to sign the entire league. They just need to sign enough stars that the WNBA's product suffers. 10 players, 15 players. That's enough to gut multiple teams and create a competitive imbalance that destroys the league's credibility. Fifth, the optics problem. For years, WNBA players have positioned themselves as advocates for women's sports. They've talked about building something bigger than themselves. They've asked fans to support the league not just for entertainment but as a social cause. And that worked. It built a loyal fan base that showed up even when the product wasn't great. But if players start leaving for Project B, that narrative collapses. You can't ask fans to support you as a cause while you're chasing money from a startup with no history and no commitment to women's sports. The cognitive dissonance is too much. Fans will feel betrayed, and they won't be wrong to feel that way. Sixth, Sophie's specific situation. She's not a superstar. She's not Brianna Stewart or Aja Wilson. She's a very good role player on a team that happens to have the league's biggest star. Her value is tied to that context. If she leaves Indiana for Project B, she's betting that Project B will be successful enough to justify walking away from the Caitlin Clark spotlight. That's a risk. Project B could fold after one season. The league could fail to attract fans. The business model could collapse. And then Sophie is 30 years old with no WNBA team and no Project B contract. She's gambling her career on an unproven entity. But here's the thing, even knowing that risk, she's still considering it because $2 million is life-changing money. It's enough to buy a house, invest for retirement, and set up financial security for the rest of her life. The WNBA can't offer that. Not even close. So the risk calculation isn't should I take this gamble? It's can I afford not to take this gamble? And for most players, the answer is no. They can't afford to turn down that money. Seventh, the league's response, or lack thereof. The WNBA has been silent on Project B. No public statements, no aggressive counteroffers, no emergency meetings with the Players Association. Just silence. And that silence is definite. It suggests the league either doesn't take the threat seriously, or they don't have the financial resources to compete. Neither option is good. If they're underestimating Project B, they're about to get blindsided. If they can't afford to compete, then the league's long-term viability is already in question. The WNBA's business model has always been fragile. The league loses money. It's subsidized by the NBA. Revenue sharing with players is complicated because there's not much revenue to share. The new media deal with ESPN is worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. That sounds impressive until you realize it's $200 million per year for the entire league. The NBA's media deal is worth $76 billion over 11 years. The gap is staggering, and it means the WNBA simply doesn't have the money to match Project B's offers, even if they wanted to. Eighth, what this means for Indiana specifically. The Fever need to bring back Caitlin Clark. Obviously, she's under contract. They need to re-sign Kelsey Mitchell. She's the second scoring option and a proven veteran. They need to keep Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull, who are both still on rookie contracts. That's the foundation. But after that, they need to fill out the roster with players who complement Caitlin's game. Sophie Cunningham is perfect for that role. She shoots over 40% from three. She doesn't need plays run for her. She plays hard defense. She's exactly what you want next to a ball-dominant point guard. If Sophie leaves, the Fever have to replace her with someone who provides similar value. But who's available? The free agent market isn't deep. Most good shooters are already locked up. And even if they find someone, that player won't have the chemistry Sophie built with Caitlin over a full season. Chemistry matters. Timing matters. Trust matters. You can't just plug in a replacement and expect the same results. The Fever would be starting over in a year when they should be building on last season's success. Ninth, the fan reaction. WNBA fans are passionate. They're invested. They care about these players and these teams, but they're also exhausted. They've spent years defending the league against critics who say women's basketball doesn't matter. They've bought merchandise, attended games, and evangelized to friends and family. And now they're watching the league potentially fall apart because of a CBA dispute and a rival league nobody had heard of 6 months ago. That's frustrating. And frustration turns into apathy real fast. If Sophie goes to Project B, fans won't blame Sophie. They'll blame the WNBA for not paying her enough to stay. They'll blame the league for mismanaging the Caitlin Clark boom. They'll blame ownership for being cheap. And they'll be right. This is a failure of leadership. The WNBA had the opportunity to lock in their players with long-term deals before Project B emerged. They didn't. They had the opportunity to negotiate a new CBA before the current one expired. They didn't. They had the opportunity to convert record ratings into record revenue. They're trying, but it's not happening fast enough. 10th. The broader implications for women's sports. This isn't just about basketball. This is about whether women athletes can build sustainable careers in professional sports. If the WNBA collapses or becomes a minor league compared to Project B, it sends a message that women's sports leagues are inherently unstable. That makes it harder to launch new leagues in other sports. It makes it harder to attract investors. It makes it harder to convince young girls that professional sports is a viable career path. The WNBA has been the flagship for women's professional sports in America for 27 years. If it fails now, the ripple effects will be devastating. So where does this leave us? Sophie Cunningham is probably going to Project B if they make her an offer. Kelsey Mitchell might follow. Other players across the league are having the same conversations with their agent. The WNBA is staring down a potential exodus of talent, and they don't have the financial resources to stop it. The CBA negotiations are stalled. The season might not happen and the league that finally found mainstream success with Caitlin Clark might implode before they can capitalize on it. The tragedy is that this was avoidable. If the WNBA had negotiated a better media deal 5 years ago, they'd have more money now. If they'd structured contracts differently, players would have more loyalty. If they'd taken the threat of rival leagues seriously earlier, they could have locked in their stars, but they didn't. And now they're paying the price. Sophie Cunningham saying, "Why would you not?" isn't cynicism, it's realism. She's a professional athlete with a limited earning window. She's had injuries. She knows her career could end tomorrow. So when someone offers her $3 million, she's taking it. And she's right to take it. The WNBA had 27 years to build a system that could compete with that offer. They failed. That's not Sophie's fault. That's the league's fault. So the question isn't whether Sophie should take the Project B money. The question is whether the WNBA can survive when dozens of players make the same decision. And right now,